The young girl had graciously given up her seat on the plane to a veteran, a gesture of kindness that spoke volumes about her character. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Meanwhile, Emily and her daughter, Emma, were now seated in their assigned seats on the delayed flight, striving to keep the little one entertained with a coloring book. The cabin was alive with the low murmur of impatient passengers. The air conditioning's constant hum did little to alleviate the collective restlessness and frustration that seemed to hang in the air. Emily glanced at her watch, her frustration mounting with each passing minute. They had been waiting for nearly an hour, and the lack of a clear explanation only added to the mounting tension. Emma, her large blue eyes brimming with curiosity, looked up at her mother with a question that reflected her growing impatience. "Mommy, why aren't we flying yet?" Her innocent question cut through the din of the cabin, and Emily forced a smile, trying to mask her irritation. "I don't know, sweetheart," she replied, her voice tinged with patience. "Sometimes these things just take time." At that moment, the cabin door creaked open, and an elderly man began to make his way down the narrow aisle. His steps were slow and labored, each movement accompanied by a noticeable limp. The man struggled with the weight of his carry-on bag, which seemed to be an extra burden on his already frail frame. His face was etched with visible strain, and although some passengers threw sympathetic glances in his direction, not everyone shared this sentiment. The man seated near the front of the plane, impeccably dressed in a sharply tailored suit, looked up from his magazine with a scowl of disdain. As the elderly man neared his seat near the window at the back of the plane, his carry-on bag accidentally brushed against the wealthy passenger. The sudden contact prompted a sharp reaction from the well-dressed man, who glared at the elderly traveler with a look of utter contempt. "Watch where you're going," he snapped, his voice dripping with irritation. "Do you even know what you're doing?" The elderly man, taken aback by the harsh rebuke, mumbled a hasty apology, his face reddening with embarrassment. He tried to continue, but the struggle was evident. As he reached his seat, he attempted to lift his heavy carry-on bag into the overhead compartment. His weakened condition made the task nearly impossible, and despite his best efforts, the bag slipped from his grasp. With a heavy thud, it fell, striking the wealthy passenger seated directly beneath the compartment. The sudden impact elicited a sharp gasp from the nearby passengers and a look of further disdain from the well-dressed man, adding to the growing tension in the cabin. The wealthy man erupted from his seat, his face contorted with rage, his eyes blazing with fury. "What in the world do you think you're doing?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the cabin as he fixed a searing glare on the elderly man who stood nearby. "Are you trying to kill someone with that bag of yours?" The elderly man, visibly shaken, stammered out an apology, his hands trembling uncontrollably. "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean to." The wealthy man cut him off, his voice growing even louder and more contemptuous. "Didn't mean to," he spat. "How could you not know the danger you're causing? Why on earth are people like you even allowed on planes? You're a menace to everyone around you." Emily felt a surge of heat rise to her cheeks, her anger intensifying as she listened to the man's harsh and humiliating words. Her gaze swept around the cabin, noting the uneasy expressions on the faces of the other passengers. Despite their evident discomfort, no one dared to speak up or intervene. Taking a deep breath, Emily tried to steady herself for the sake of her daughter, Emma, who was seated beside her. She could feel her frustration bubbling just beneath the surface, her urge to respond to the injustice growing stronger with each passing moment. Her eyes remained fixed on the elderly man, who, despite his visible distress, was painstakingly trying to secure his bag in the overhead compartment. His hands continued to shake as he fumbled with the latch, the burden of the confrontation weighing on him. Throughout this ordeal, the wealthy man remained seated, sneering and offering no assistance. Emily's heart ached for the elderly man, and she knew she could not remain silent in the face of such blatant cruelty. Just as she was about to rise from her seat and confront the wealthy man, the calm voice of the flight attendant came over the intercom, cutting through the tension. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and fasten your seatbelts. We are about to begin our takeoff." With a frustrated sigh, Emily reluctantly settled back into her seat, casting one last, exasperated glance at the wealthy man, hoping he might at least show some modicum of respect for the remainder of the flight. Although her frustration simmered just beneath the surface, she tried to redirect her focus to Emma, who was now quietly engrossed in her coloring book. The plane taxied down the runway, and as it began its ascent into the sky, Emily let out a small, weary sigh of relief. She hoped that the rest of the flight would proceed without further incident, but as the seatbelt sign was finally turned off, her hope for a peaceful journey was abruptly overshadowed by a sense of foreboding. The wealthy man began to shift uncomfortably in his seat, making exaggerated movements that caught the attention of those nearby. He muttered under his breath, his frustration palpable. With a dramatic press of the call button for the flight attendant, he raised his voice loud enough for everyone around to hear, declaring, "I need to move. I absolutely cannot sit here. The odor coming from that elderly man is making me feel physically ill." The flight attendant approached with a professional demeanor, her expression a mix of politeness and firmness. "Sir, could you please lower your voice? What seems to be the issue?" "The issue," the wealthy man said, pointing an accusatory finger at the elderly man seated nearby. "The issue is this, man. I refuse to sit next to someone who smells like a hospital. It's utterly revolting." Emily's anger surged at the man's blatant disrespect. She could no longer remain silent. Standing up with determination, her voice cut through the tension in the cabin. "That's enough. This man deserves respect, not your offensive remarks." The wealthy man turned his gaze toward Emily, his face contorted with irritation. "And who do you think you are? This is none of your concern." Emily met his gaze unflinchingly, her resolve unshaken. It's everyone's business when someone is being treated unfairly. This man is a veteran who has served this country with honor. He deserves our respect and gratitude, not your disdain. The cabin fell into an uneasy silence as passengers turned their attention to the unfolding confrontation. Emily's voice grew more resolute. "My daughter and I will gladly give up our seats so that this gentleman can be more comfortable. He deserves to be treated with dignity, far better than to be next to someone like you." Turning to her daughter, Emma, who was watching with wide, concerned eyes, Emily said, "Emma, we're going to let this gentleman have our seats. You can sit on my lap for the rest of the flight, all right?" Emma nodded solemnly, her young face reflecting her understanding of the situation. "Okay, Mommy." The wealthy man's face reddened with indignation. "You can't just," he began, his voice trailing off as he struggled to find the right words. Before he could finish his sentence, several other passengers on the plane began to speak out, their voices rising in support of Emily. "She's right," one man asserted firmly, his tone laden with frustration. "Show some respect for others," another woman chimed in with a disapproving nod. "You should be ashamed of yourself for behaving this way." Seeing the growing discontent among the passengers, the flight attendant intervened decisively, her voice firm and commanding. "Sir, I must ask you to lower your voice and show proper respect for your fellow passengers. Ma'am, if you and your daughter would prefer to change seats, we'll be happy to assist you in making those arrangements." Emily nodded gratefully, her demeanor calm and composed as she helped Emma gather her belongings. The elderly man, who had been silently observing the scene, looked at Emily with eyes that conveyed a mix of relief and surprise. "Thank you so much, miss," he said earnestly. "You didn't have to go through all this trouble for me." Emily responded with a warm, reassuring smile. "It's the least we can do," she said gently. "You deserve to travel in comfort just like everyone else." With the flight attendant's assistance, the elderly man moved to the seats adjacent to Emily and Emma. Emma, feeling secure and comforted, settled onto Emily's lap, while the elderly man took the seat that had previously been occupied by Emma. His expression visibly relaxed as he adjusted to the newfound comfort of his new seat. The wealthy man, who had been silently fuming throughout the exchange, shot one final, disdainful glare at Emily before turning away, his dissatisfaction evident. Emily and Emma then made their way carefully down the narrow aisle towards the seats at the back of the plane. The elderly man followed at a slower pace, his steps more assured and less burdened by anxiety now that he had found a more comfortable place. The flight attendant expertly managed the seating arrangement, ensuring that everyone was settled in their new positions comfortably. Once they were seated, Emily gently lifted Emma onto her lap, fastening her seatbelt with care. She looked down at her daughter with a tender expression. "Are you okay, sweetie?" she asked, brushing a stray strand of hair from Emma's face. Emma's eyes, wide with curiosity, met her mother's gaze. "Mommy, who was that man?" she inquired innocently, her young mind processing the recent events. Emily's gaze settled on the elderly man as he eased into the seat next to them. "He's a very special person, Emma. You'll see," she said softly, trying to ease her daughter's curiosity. The man, having finally managed to settle himself, leaned back with a deep sigh of relief. The visible tension in his shoulders seemed to melt away. "Thank you again," he said quietly, his voice carrying a tone of deep gratitude. "I didn't expect such kindness." Emily offered a warm smile, her sense of empathy reflected in her expression. "It's no trouble at all. We're happy to help. I'm Emily, by the way, and this is my daughter, Emma." The elderly man returned her smile, his eyes softening. "I'm Robert. It's a pleasure to meet you both." As the plane continued its journey, Emily noticed the military hat that Robert had placed carefully on his lap. The faded insignia suggested a long history of service, sparking her curiosity. Her eyes then fell on the photo album partially visible from his carry-on bag. "That's an interesting hat," Emily remarked, nodding toward it. "Were you in the military?" Robert looked down at the hat, a gentle smile playing on his lips as he reminisced. "Yes, I served for many years. It feels like a lifetime ago." Emma, ever inquisitive, leaned in closer with wide eyes. "Did you fight in wars?" Robert nodded, his gaze growing distant as he seemed to traverse through old memories. "Yes, I did. I was involved in World War II and the Korean War." Emily's eyes widened in awe. "That's incredible. Thank you for your service." Robert waved a hand modestly as if to downplay his heroism. "I did what I had to do, just like so many others. We all did our part." Emma, always brimming with questions, looked at Robert with intense curiosity. "Did you get hurt?" Robert hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Yes, I did. I got this limp from a bullet wound. There are still some pieces of shrapnel lodged in my leg." Emily and Emma listened attentively as Robert began to share more of his past. "I remember one particular battle in Korea," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "We were ambushed, and it was absolute chaos. My best friend, Jack, and I were fighting side by side, trying to escape." Emma's voice was a mere whisper as she asked, "What happened to Jack?" Robert's eyes clouded with sorrow, and he took a deep breath before answering. "Jack didn't make it. He saved my life, though pulled me out of the line of fire, but he was hit. I carry his memory with me every day." Emily reached out and touched Robert's arm gently, her heart aching for him. "I'm so sorry. That must have been incredibly hard." Robert nodded, his expression somber. "It was. War leaves scars, not just on the body but on the heart. I've lost many friends, and those memories never fade." His voice trailed off, leaving a heavy silence in the air as the gravity of his words hung between them. What was it like? Emily asked softly, her voice carrying a blend of curiosity and reverence. Being in the middle of it all. Robert paused for a moment, his gaze turning distant as he took a deep breath, the weight of his memories evident in his eyes. It was both terrifying and exhilarating all at once. He began, his voice tinged with a raw honesty. Every day felt like a precarious balance on the edge of a knife. You never really knew if you'd make it through to the next day. But amidst the chaos, we had each other. That camaraderie, that sense of brotherhood, was what made it bearable. We were like family, bound together by our shared experiences and unspoken understanding. As if on cue, the plane hit a brief patch of turbulence. Emma instinctively clung to Emily's arm, her small frame trembling slightly. Robert noticed her discomfort and leaned in with a reassuring smile. "We're safe now," he said gently, his voice soothing. "It's just a little bump, nothing to worry about." The turbulence soon subsided, and the plane began to stabilize, making the journey smoother. Emily and Emma listened intently as Robert continued to share his stories, his voice weaving through tales of bravery, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds forged in the crucible of adversity. Each story painted vivid pictures of the past, capturing the essence of the courage and resilience that Robert embodied. Emily felt a profound sense of gratitude and reflection as she listened. She realized how much she had taken for granted in her own life, and how crucial it was to extend kindness and respect to those who had given so much. The historical insights and personal anecdotes not only enriched her understanding but also highlighted the importance of recognizing and honoring the sacrifices made by others. "Thank you for sharing your stories with us," Emily said, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. "You've made this flight much more meaningful." Robert's smile widened, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "It was my pleasure," he replied warmly. "Sometimes, talking about the past helps us remember not just the trials, but also the good times and the deep connections we made. It's a way of keeping those memories alive." As the flight progressed, the atmosphere in the cabin was one of quiet contentment. Emily and Emma had not only gained a deeper appreciation for the history and bravery Robert represented, but had also forged a new and meaningful connection. The plane's descent approached, and Emily reflected on the valuable lessons learned about respect, empathy, and the significance of acknowledging those who had paved the way. When the plane finally touched down and came to a stop, Robert turned to Emily and Emma, his demeanor still warm and sincere. He shook their hands firmly, a gesture of gratitude and camaraderie. "Safe travels," he said with a heartfelt smile. "Take care, and thank you for making this journey unforgettable for me." With that, Emily and Emma exited the plane, their hearts full of newfound respect and appreciation, carrying with them the memorable experience of a meaningful encounter that had transformed their flight into something truly special. Emily and Emma waved goodbye as Robert walked toward the exit. His steps were noticeably lighter, and his posture seemed more upright than before. As they gathered their belongings and prepared to disembark, Emily looked at Emma with a warm, proud smile. "You did well today, sweetie. I'm so proud of you." Emma's face lit up with a broad smile as she hugged her mother tightly. "I'm proud of us too, Mommy. We helped someone today. They left the plane, their hearts full of gratitude for the experience and the powerful reminder of the importance of kindness and empathy." Later, as they settled into a quieter space, Robert shared more about his past. He showed Emily and Emma a photo album, pointing out images of his fellow soldiers. "These were my comrades," he said, his voice filled with a deep sense of nostalgia and reverence. "We went through hell and back together." He paused at a particular photo, his finger resting on a tall, strong-looking man. "That's Jack," he said, his voice softening with emotion. "He was my best friend." Emily could detect profound respect and a hint of sorrow in his tone, an unspoken weight that these memories carried for him. "Jack saved my life more times than I can count," Robert continued, his eyes growing distant as he recalled the past. There was one time in Korea when things were especially dire. We were caught in an ambush with bullets flying all around us. Jack pulled me out of the line of fire, but he didn't make it. Emily felt a lump forming in her throat, her heart aching for the pain Robert had endured. "I'm so sorry, Robert," she said gently. Robert nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant memories. War leaves scars, not just on the body but on the heart. I still have shrapnel in my leg from that day, but the real pain is losing friends like Jack. Emma, who had been listening quietly, reached out and touched Robert's arm with a mixture of curiosity and empathy. "Did it hurt a lot, mister?" Robert, she asked softly. Robert looked down at the young girl, his eyes reflecting both the weight of his experiences and a glimmer of gratitude for her concern. "Yes, it hurt a lot," he said quietly, "but it's the memories of those we've lost that can be the hardest to bear." Emma nodded solemnly, her innocent compassion touching Robert deeply. Robert's gentle smile softened as he acknowledged Emily's concern. "Yes, Emma, it did. We did what we believed was right, protecting our country and each other," he said, his tone laced with a sense of duty and camaraderie. As he turned another page in the album, Emily's eyes were drawn to a particular photograph that stood out amidst the sea of images. It was a snapshot of Robert and Jack, both grinning widely, their expressions filled with a rare moment of joy, despite the grim backdrop of war. Emily felt a pang of recognition, a flicker of something deeply familiar about Jack's face that tugged persistently at the edge of her memory. Curiosity piqued. Emily pointed to the photograph and asked, "Who took this picture?" Robert looked up from the album, his expression thoughtful. "One of our fellow soldiers," he explained. "It was taken just a few days before the ambush. We were so hopeful then, believing we might make it back home." As Emily's gaze lingered on Jack's face, her heart began to race with a mix of excitement and unease. The more she examined the photograph, the stronger the sensation grew. The features, the expression, they were hauntingly familiar. She had seen this face before, not in the distant past, but within the confines of her own family's old photo albums. Trying to keep her voice steady, Emily asked, "Do you have any other photos of Jack?" Robert nodded, his fingers flipping through the pages of the album with practiced ease. Each photo captured different facets of camaraderie and hardship, yet they all shared a common thread: the faces of those who had endured so much together. Finally, he paused on a photograph that seemed to hold a particular significance. "This one was taken right before the ambush," Robert said, his voice carrying a weight of both pride and sorrow. "Jack and I had a premonition that something was coming, but we wanted to keep our spirits high." Emily's hands trembled slightly as she leaned in closer to the photograph. The man in the image bore an astonishing resemblance to her grandfather, a similarity so striking it was impossible to dismiss. Her breath caught in her throat as the realization began to sink in. "Robert," Emily began, her voice quivering with a mix of disbelief and hope, "I think Jack might be my grandfather." Robert's eyes widened with shock as he absorbed Emily's revelation. "Your grandfather," he repeated, his voice filled with disbelief. Emily nodded, tears welling up in her eyes as she spoke. "I remember seeing photos of him when I was a child. My mother used to tell me stories about how he saved lives during the war but never returned." The realization struck Robert with a profound mix of surprise and sorrow. "If Jack was your grandfather, then I owe him my life," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "He was the bravest man I ever knew." The weight of the connection between her grandfather and Robert hit Emily with full force. The man she had heard countless stories about, her heroic grandfather, was the very same Jack who had saved Robert's life. A flood of emotions washed over her: shock, admiration, and an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "Thank you," Emily whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you for sharing this with me. I never knew the full story." The depth of her appreciation was evident in her voice, choked with emotion. Robert reached out, gently taking Emily's hand in his. "Thank you for listening and for letting me remember. Your grandfather was a true hero, and it's an honor to have known him." Sensing the gravity of the moment, Emma snuggled closer to her mother, her small face reflecting the seriousness of the conversation. "Mommy, is Mr. Robert talking about Grandpa?" she asked, her voice filled with innocent curiosity. Emily nodded, her voice trembling as she replied, "Yes, Emma, Mr. Robert knew your great-grandpa. He was very brave." The significance of the moment seemed to resonate deeply with both mother and daughter. As the flight continued, the remaining time passed in a blur for Emily. She and Robert engaged in a heartfelt conversation, sharing memories and stories that bridged their shared past. The plane's descent felt surreal, as if the enormity of their discovery had momentarily suspended time. Once the plane landed and passengers began to disembark, Emily turned to Robert with a mix of determination and hope. "Mr. Robert," she began, her voice slightly trembling with anticipation, "I have a favor to ask. Would you join Emma and me for a short trip? There's someone I'd like you to meet." Robert looked at her with a curious expression. "A trip? Where to?" he inquired, a hint of hesitation in his voice. Emily offered a reassuring smile, hoping to ease his uncertainty. "It's not far, just a short drive from here. I promise it'll be worth your time." Robert hesitated, glancing at his watch as he weighed the offer. "I don't want to impose," he said, clearly conflicted. Emily's smile remained warm and encouraging. "You won't be imposing at all. It's important to me, and I believe it will be meaningful for both of us." She paused, hoping her sincerity would convince him. "You won't be imposing at all," Emily assured Robert with a reassuring smile. "I think you'll be very glad you came." Robert considered her words for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he nodded with a sense of trust. "All right then. I trust you." They gathered their belongings and began making their way through the bustling terminal. Emily felt a flutter of nerves mixed with excitement. This wasn't something she had planned for, but it felt like the right decision. As they emerged into the parking lot, Emily led Robert to her car, gently helping him into the passenger seat before sliding into the driver's side. Emma, ever curious, hopped into the back seat, her small face glowing with anticipation. The drive through the quiet suburban streets was initially serene, the steady hum of the car engine providing a comforting backdrop. Robert gazed out the window, taking in the peaceful scenery with a subtle sense of intrigue. "Where are we headed?" he asked, his voice filled with curiosity. "You'll see," Emily replied, her tone playful and enigmatic. She exchanged a knowing glance with Emma, who giggled softly, clearly excited by the secret. After a brief drive, they arrived at a charming old house nestled in a serene, tree-lined neighborhood. The house radiated a sense of nostalgic warmth, with its lovingly maintained garden and inviting front porch. Robert's curiosity grew as they approached the front door, his eyes scanning the familiar surroundings. "This is where I grew up," Emily said, her voice filled with affection. "My father still lives here." She guided Robert inside, where the comforting aroma of home enveloped them. The cozy living room, decorated with family photos and cherished mementos, greeted them with an inviting atmosphere. In the kitchen, Emily's father, David, was busy preparing tea. When he looked up and saw them, his face broke into a warm smile. "Hi, Dad," Emily greeted, embracing him in a heartfelt hug. "This is Robert." David extended his hand in a welcoming gesture. "Nice to meet you, Robert." Robert shook David's hand firmly, his smile genuine. "Nice to meet you too, David." Before anyone could say more, the room was interrupted by the entrance of an elderly man. He moved slowly but with an unmistakable air of dignity, his eyes lighting up with recognition when he saw Robert. Jack Roberts' voice trembled with disbelief, barely more than a whisper. "Jack," the elderly man echoed, his own eyes widening in astonishment. In that fleeting moment, It felt as though time had momentarily frozen. Then, with an outpouring of emotion, the two men closed the distance between them and embraced. Tears streamed down their faces as they held each other tightly, the depth of their reunion overwhelming them. I thought you were gone," Robert said, his voice choked with emotion. Jack, still holding Robert close, pulled back slightly to look into his old friend's eyes, his own filled with tears. "I was for a while, but I made it back. And now, here we are." The room was filled with a profound sense of joy and relief as the two friends reunited, their shared past and deep bond evident in their emotional embrace. Emily watched with a heart full of happiness and relief. This was the moment she had been hoping for, the reason she had brought Robert here. Her gaze shifted to Emma, who was observing the scene with wide eyes, clearly grasping the significance of the reunion. Robert and Jack sat down together, still holding each other's hands, their faces reflecting a blend of nostalgia and emotion as they began to reminisce about their shared past. Jack broke the silence with a question that carried the weight of their history. "Do you remember that time in Normandy?" His smile was bittersweet, breaking through the tears that had gathered in his eyes. Robert chuckled, nodding in agreement. "How could I forget? We were terrified, but we managed to make it through." Jack's voice grew more somber as he continued, "And Korea. You saved my life more times than I can count." Robert shook his head, his own eyes misting over. "It was you who saved me, Jack. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you." The two men continued to exchange stories, their bond as strong as ever despite the many years that had passed. Emily and David worked quietly in the background, setting out tea and snacks to ensure the old friends had everything they needed while giving them the space to reconnect. Emma sat close to her mother, her attention fixed on the tales of bravery and friendship being shared. David joined the conversation, contributing his memories of Jack and recounting stories passed down from Emily's grandfather. "You were always a part of our family," David said warmly, "even if we didn't know it until now." Robert looked around at the faces surrounding him, feeling the warmth and welcome in the room. "I'm honored to be here," he said softly. "Thank you for bringing me." As the evening wore on, the conversation flowed effortlessly. Laughter mingled with tears as they shared their experiences, deepening the sense of camaraderie with each story told. Emily felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Not only had she uncovered a significant piece of her family's history, but she had also played a part in reuniting two old friends. As the night deepened, Jack and Robert continued to share their stories, their connection growing stronger with every word. Jack leaned back, a soft smile playing on his lips as he prepared to reveal a piece of his past. "You know, Robert, I never got to tell you how I survived that day in Korea." Robert's eyes widened with curiosity and concern. "I always wondered. I saw you get hit, and then there was nothing. I thought you were gone." Jack's expression became thoughtful as he began to recount the details, each word a testament to their shared history and the enduring bond of their friendship. Jack nodded solemnly, his expression reflecting the weight of his memories. "It was a close call. After I pulled you out of the line of fire, I got hit. Everything went black. When I came to, I found myself in a field hospital. I owe my life to a nurse who refused to give up on me." Robert's face softened with understanding as he listened to Jack's story. "It seems that we were both saved by the strength and dedication of those around us," he said, his voice full of empathy. Jack's somber expression lifted into a warm smile. "Yes, and I truly believe that we were destined to find each other again. Your visit today has been a blessing." Emily, observing the heartfelt exchange, felt a profound sense of gratitude. She knew this was a moment of deep significance, a testament to the enduring power of friendship and the extraordinary ways in which life can reconnect us with the people who matter. As the evening drew to a close, Robert and Jack exchanged emotional farewells, their promises to stay in touch underscoring the strength of their rekindled bond. Emily and Emma walked them to the door, their hearts filled with the warmth of shared experience and newfound connections. "Thank you," Emily, Robert said, his eyes glistening with emotion. "For everything." Emily beamed, her heart swelling with happiness. "It was truly my pleasure. I'm so glad we could reconnect." As Robert and Jack drove away into the night, Emily and Emma stood on the porch, watching the car's headlights fade into the distance. A deep sense of fulfillment enveloped Emily, knowing she had played a part in reuniting two old friends and forging new memories. "Mommy, can we invite Mr. Robert over again?" Emma asked, her voice hopeful and sincere. Emily smiled warmly at her daughter, her heart brimming with love. "Of course, Emma. We will invite him over again." With a final glance at the starlit sky, Emily closed the door and wrapped her arms around her daughter, feeling immense gratitude for the unexpected journey that had brought them all closer together. Meanwhile, inside the car, Jack reached out and grasped Robert's hand with a firm grip. The conversation between them flowed effortlessly, laughter mingling with tears as they reminisced about their shared past. They recounted stories of friends they had lost and the moments of joy and sorrow they had experienced together. The bond between them, once nearly lost to the ravages of time and war, was now stronger than ever, fortified by their reunion and the memories they cherished. As the evening deepened, the atmosphere took on a reflective, almost reverent tone. Jack, his voice laden with emotion, looked intently at Robert. "You know," he began, his voice quivering slightly, "I spent years believing you were gone. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to endure." Robert, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, nodded in understanding. "I know. I saw you fall, and at that moment I thought it was the end. Losing you felt like losing a part of myself. But now, seeing you here, it feels like destiny has brought us back together." Emily, who had been quietly observing the reunion, felt her heart swell with a profound sense of gratitude and fulfillment. She was deeply moved by the realization that she had played a role in reconnecting these two old friends. "Maybe it was fate," Robert said softly. "Maybe it was meant to be that I met Emily and came here. It's like closing a chapter that needed to be completed." Jack's eyes twinkled with warmth as he smiled. "I believe that too. And now that we're together again, let's make the most of this precious time." As the evening drew to a close, Emily and David busied themselves preparing a guest room for Robert. David, with a welcoming tone, suggested, "Why don't you stay with us for a while? You and Jack have so much catching up to do." Robert, initially hesitant, felt the sincerity in David's offer and nodded appreciatively. "I'd like that. Thank you." The following morning, the house was filled with the comforting aroma of breakfast. Jack and Robert sat at the dining table, their conversation flowing as if the years apart had been mere moments. The days that followed were rich with shared meals, leisurely walks, and meaningful conversations. They reminisced about old memories, laughed heartily, and savored the joy of creating new ones together. One evening, as they relaxed on the porch and watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Jack turned to Robert with a contemplative look. "You know, Robert," he said thoughtfully, "we should plan a trip together. Visit some of the places we fought, pay our respects." His eyes gleamed with the excitement of a long-awaited plan. Robert's face brightened with enthusiasm. "I'd love that. It would be a journey worth taking." Emily and David, having overheard the conversation, stepped outside to join them. "That sounds like a wonderful idea," Emily said, her voice filled with encouragement. "You both deserve to take that trip." David nodded in agreement. "We'll help you plan it. It'll be a trip to remember." Jack and Robert exchanged smiles, their hearts brimming with anticipation and joy. "Let's do it," Jack said with conviction, "for old time's sake." The promise of this new adventure added a sense of excitement to their days, and the bond between the old friends grew even stronger, enriched by the shared experiences and mutual respect that had endured through the years. Over the next week, Emily, David, and Robert immersed themselves in planning their upcoming trip, huddled around maps and engaging in lively discussions about the destinations they wished to explore. Emily and David meticulously handled the logistics, ensuring that every detail was attended to so their journey would go off without a hitch. The air was filled with a sense of purpose and anticipation as they prepared for this special adventure. As the time approached for Robert to return to his own home to pack for the trip, he took a moment to express his gratitude. He embraced Emily and David warmly, his voice filled with sincerity. "Thank you for everything," he said, his eyes reflecting deep appreciation. "This has been more than I could have ever hoped for." Emily, her eyes glistening with tears of joy, returned his sentiment with a heartfelt smile. "It's been our pleasure, Robert. You're part of our family now." Emma, clutching Robert's hand with a mixture of affection and curiosity, looked up at him with hopeful eyes. "Will you come back and visit us, mister?" Robert, she asked, her voice tinged with a childlike sincerity. Robert crouched down to Emma's level, his smile gentle and reassuring. "Of course, Emma," he said warmly. "I'll be back before you know it, and I'll have lots of stories to share with you." As Robert and Jack set off on their journey, Emily and David stood together, watching the car drive away with a profound sense of satisfaction. The act of reuniting two long-lost friends and creating new bonds had brought them immense fulfillment. The trip had unfolded in ways they hadn't anticipated, filled with moments of surprise, connection, and revelation. It served as a poignant reminder of the value of relationships, the power of memories, and the significance of respect. Several weeks later, Emily stood on the porch, her gaze fixed down the road with a mixture of eagerness and anticipation. She had been looking forward to this day for some time. Emma stood beside her, her excitement palpable, as she bounced with enthusiasm. "Do you think they had fun?" Mommy Emma asked, her eyes wide with curiosity and hope. Emily wrapped her arm around her daughter, her heart brimming with warmth and contentment. "I'm sure they did, sweetheart," she replied softly. "I know they had an incredible time, and now we get to hear all about their adventures and the wonderful memories they've made." The anticipation of Robert and Jack's return filled Emily with a sense of joy and fulfillment, knowing that the bonds they had strengthened and the memories they had created would continue to enrich their lives. A familiar car appeared in the distance, and Emma's excitement bubbled over as it slowly pulled into the driveway. Unable to contain her enthusiasm any longer, she dashed down the path to greet it. As the car came to a stop and the doors swung open, Robert and Jack emerged, their faces glowing with rejuvenation. The years of worry and regret seemed to have melted away, replaced by expressions of joy and vitality. "Grandpa." "Mister." Robert Emma's voice rang out with pure happiness as she spotted the two men. Jack immediately scooped her up in a big, affectionate hug. "Hello, darling. We've missed you so much." Robert's smile was warm and full of genuine pleasure as he looked at Emma. "Hi there, Emma. We've got so many stories to share with you." Emily approached with her own heart swelling with emotion. She wrapped both men in heartfelt hugs. "Welcome home," she said, her voice thick with feeling. "You both look wonderful." "We feel wonderful," Jack replied, his eyes sparkling with the excitement of the journey. It was an incredible trip. That evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, the room was alive with laughter and the rich aroma of the hearty meal Emily had prepared. The cozy kitchen was filled with a warm sense of togetherness. Emily's curiosity was palpable as she eagerly invited Robert and Jack to recount their adventures. "So tell us everything," she said, leaning in with interest. Jack and Robert exchanged a glance, their smiles revealing the deep satisfaction of their experiences. "Well," Robert began, "our first stop was Normandy. Being back on those beaches again was an indescribable experience. We took time to remember our comrades and honor their memories. It was deeply moving and a powerful reminder of the sacrifices made." Jack nodded in agreement. "We also made our way to Korea, revisiting the old battlefields. But it wasn't just about the places we saw. It was more about the people we encountered along the way, fellow veterans, and their families. It was a shared journey of healing and reconnecting with those who understand the weight of our experiences." Robert's eyes sparkled with a hint of mischief. "And we had a bit of fun too. Remember that night in Paris, Jack?" Jack chuckled, a broad grin spreading across his face. "How could I forget? We ended up in a charming little cafe, chatting with locals and sharing stories until the early hours of the morning. It felt like we were young again, free from the weight of the years." The room erupted in laughter as they continued to share anecdotes from their travels, their stories weaving a rich tapestry of history, camaraderie, and newfound joy. The evening was a celebration of friendship and family, filled with the warmth of shared memories and the promise of many more to come. Emma's eyes sparkled with wonder as she gazed at Jack. "Did you bring back any souvenirs?" she asked eagerly. Jack's face softened with a smile as he reached into his bag, carefully extracting a small hand-carved wooden box. "This is for you, Emma," he said, his voice full of warmth. "We found it in a market in Seoul. It's a traditional Korean music box." With great care, Emma opened the box, and a delicate, enchanting melody began to play. Her face lit up with pure delight as she listened to the tune. "Thank you, Grandpa." "Thank you, Mr. Robert," she said, her voice brimming with joy. Robert's eyes crinkled at the corners as he watched Emma's happiness. "You're very welcome, Emma," he replied, his tone reflecting genuine affection. "We thought of you often during our travels." As the evening progressed, the dinner table was alive with stories and laughter. The men shared anecdotes from their journey, each tale evoking hearty laughter and fond memories. It was evident that their trip had been a transformative experience for both Jack and Robert. They seemed lighter, their burdens momentarily lifted by the joy of reconnecting and the shared experiences. As dinner drew to a close, Emily cleared her throat, her gaze thoughtful and intent. "Robert, we've been talking, and we'd like to ask you something," she began, her voice steady but filled with a hint of anticipation. Robert raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What's that?" Emily exchanged a glance with Jack, who gave a supportive nod. "We'd like you to stay with us permanently. Jack needs someone close, someone who truly understands him, and we'd love to have you as a permanent part of our family." Robert's eyes widened with surprise and a touch of disbelief. "Are you sure? I wouldn't want to impose." Jack's voice was firm and resolute as he spoke up. "You wouldn't be imposing at all. We've spent so many years apart, each thinking the other was gone. Now that we've found each other again, I don't want to waste another moment." Emily nodded in agreement, her eyes filled with sincerity. "You've already become a part of our lives, Robert. It would mean the world to us if you stayed." Robert glanced around the table, taking in the hopeful and loving expressions of Jack, Emily, and little Emma. His heart swelled with emotion as he took in their genuine offer. "I'd be honored," he said softly, his voice tinged with gratitude. "Thank you. Thank you all." Emma's face brightened with sheer excitement as she clapped her hands. "Yay, Mr. Robert is staying." Later that evening, as they settled into the cozy living room, Robert felt a profound sense of belonging. Surrounded by people who genuinely cared for him, who understood the depth of his past and shared in the joy of his present, he felt at home in a way he hadn't in years. Jack raised a glass, his voice rich with emotion. To the family, both old and new, to the memories we've made, and to the ones we'll continue to create together. The clinking of glasses resonated with a sense of unity and hope as they all raised their glasses in a toast. Robert looked around, his heart filled with peace and contentment. He had found his place not just in a home, but in the hearts of those who had welcomed him with open arms. The journey that had begun with an unexpected flight had led him to a new beginning, one brimming with love, laughter, and the promise of many more stories to come. As the night wore on and the conversations grew quieter, Emily watched the two old friends share a serene and heartfelt conversation, their faces glowing with contentment. Grateful for the serendipitous journey that had brought them all together, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. In the tranquil quiet of the evening, surrounded by the warmth of family, Robert knew he was finally home. I hope this story has touched your heart as much as it has mine. We've journeyed through a powerful narrative of friendship, healing, and the unexpected joys of reconnecting with loved ones. From the heartfelt reunion of Jack and Robert to the warm hospitality of Emily and David, we've seen how enduring bonds and small acts of kindness can create profound impacts in our lives. So what have you learned from this story? I'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections. Please share in the comments below one key takeaway you've gained and how you plan to incorporate it into your life. Your insights and experiences can inspire and encourage others. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more heartwarming stories and spiritual content. Your support helps us continue to bring meaningful content to you. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.